Barack Obama essentially showing this crowd why he is still such a star inside the Democratic Party, but perhaps overshadowed by his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, who gave a amazing speech that got this crowd on their feet to say do something in refrain after refrain. She had some tough shots against the former president, but really was a call to action for this Democratic Party to come behind this new ticket, saying America is ready for a new chapter.
Absolutely, Brett. She said hope is making a comeback, drawing the line from Kamala Harris back to her husband's campaign of hope. It was interesting. She said hope has been buried for too long in this country, and it's time to be hopeful again, kind of leapfrogging over the current Biden presidency. With that moment, I thought. Then we heard a lot of discussion from President Obama about how people need to get back to being good to each other, being kind to each other, having integrity. I think a lot of people at the prior convention felt like they fit those categories as well. So
we shouldn't overlook the speech before that. Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman,
yeah, he did a good job.
Was really, really personable, really engaging. It showed Kamala Harris, the vice president, in a personal light that was funny, and kind of said, that laugh? I love that laugh.
Yeah, that was a good moment.
Taking something of, obviously some critics say a vulnerability of hers, turning it into an asset for him. Yeah. But tonight, this was the big rollout. The second night, and it was one in which these people in this hall we're fired up about. Let's bring in our panel. Brit Hume, Dana Perino, Harold Ford Jr., and Robert Wolf. Brit, your thoughts?
Well, I think there was a night of very good speeches. Emhoff, I think, was excellent, charming, affecting. Barack Obama was his old self, his familiar self, with a superb sense of timing and cadence, and his delivery was so familiar with. His speech, however, was way too long, maybe 40 to 50% too long. I agree with you guys. I think the speech of the night was Michelle Obama. She is an extraordinarily impressive woman, former First Lady of the United States. You can see why members of the Democratic Party always kind of hoped that maybe she'd step in and run for president after him in any of these past several cycles. It does, however, I have to say this, get a little rich when she starts talking about hope. You may recall she famously said back when her husband first was on the cusp of winning his party's nomination, it was the first time in her life that she had felt hope because of what he brought and what he was bringing. And here she is again tonight saying, at last again, I can't imagine why somebody who has had the life she's had, a product of Princeton and Harvard Law School, an elite law firm, the First Lady of the United States, with a magnificent house on Martha's Vineyard worth about $12 million and another one going up in Hawaii, why it is that she's so hopeless all the time and has to have her hope revived by the goings-on in the Democratic Party. But there it is. She was apart from that, I thought she was just terrific.
Dana, we did start this entire day 30 minutes early.
Yes.
They are ending ahead of midnight, East Coast time, but not that far ahead of midnight.
And happiest person is not here. That is Greg Gutfeld, and he is coming up at midnight. He's going to take over and have a great show for everybody. I did think that the Emhoff speech was very special because every woman would imagine if their husband could give a speech about them like that, it would be very moving, and I thought so the romance is alive. And you have another example of Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, great partnership. And for this crowd in this room, it was a beautiful speech. And again, like the oratory skills are incredible. There's one thing that Obama said, though, the president. He said, we don't need 4 more years of bumbling and chaos. Now, he was talking about President Trump, but I imagine that President Trump was somewhere saying, that's exactly what I've been saying.
Yeah.
He's talking about the last 4 years, and if you look at what people are saying about how they feel about the direction of the country, the state of their finances, the debt that they feel, the inflation, all of those things, they want a change from that.
Yeah, Harold, a lot of talk about how Americans are struggling and that, there needs to be hope for them to be able to, for their kids to be safe, for them not to have to struggle to make payments, all of this, which is an issue that we heard a lot about at the last convention as well. It's a question about whether or not smaller government or bigger government is the way to get there.
I agree. I think I can only echo what's been said. I thought Doug humanized his wife tonight. They laugh together. They love. They live. They're a blended family. He talked proudly about it, and he clearly knows how to laugh at himself a little bit, and I think humanize himself. I thought her line, I agree with everyone, Michelle Obama's speech was the best. President Obama was his normal self, but Michelle was her normal self. She said, give more than you take. And I think you can begin to see how an economic plan, the philosophical outlines of one, the contours of one, will be made. She used the word monopoly. She said no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American. So you can see some of the shape of it. And then finally, President Obama, I thought his speech in many ways presaged some of the attacks that are going to come towards this ticket, the personal attacks as well as the policy attacks. He talked about the kindness, talked about the kind of frame that Americans should anticipate and view these kind of attacks that come from the other side. But I thought the overall thing from all three of them, they were positive. They were. Don't get me wrong. They talked about the contrast. They talked about what was at stake. But there was a positive tone to it, and I can only hope that come Wednesday, Mr. Waltz tomorrow, and obviously Ms. Harris on Thursday, Democrats should feel good about the reset that happened tonight and where they're headed towards the end of this week.
We do have another former president tomorrow, President Bill Clinton, so it could be another long one. Robert, quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Doug was just a good guy. He talked about fantasy football and Little League. And he also made it very clear he was Jewish, and that Kamala and he talk about religion often. I think with Michelle, I was at Mrs. Robinson's funeral, and I know how deep this was today for her, and she was really talking, I think, from her heart. And I would say, Brit, no disrespect, but her parents worked their whole life. She was on scholarship. Her sub-brother was on scholarship. They were not born one step from home plate like the former president was. And so I just think we should make sure we understand where someone came from before we make those comments. With respect to the president, I think it was very clear. He just put a platform in front of this country, and it is a choice election. And he could not make the difference more stark. I don't want to say it's good versus bad, because I think he talked much more about all Americans, but I think it's about the importance of education. It's the importance of people having freedom and rights and reproductive rights. So I thought it was a very positive, and they didn't talk about mass deportation. And there wasn't a negative aspect to it. So I would agree with Harold. It was a very positive take.
Well, they chewed up the former president pretty good.
Yeah, there was no...
some line.
Yeah.
There wasn't...
It was not all.
There wasn't, I think it was called love trumps hate, or hate trumps love, whatever they used it during the Clinton, or go high. And no, they went at the president.
There were some swings.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.